corner of your eye. You can if you see one and then you sort of scan around with your eyes, they will become like those 3D pictures where if you stare a certain way, the image will become clear. And it's that way with the iguanas, because if you look at one, you're like, oh my God, there's another one. There's another one. There's another one. And they're everywhere.
So there's
and they're real creepy, but they look very intelligent. They're like a bunch of little, I don't know, lizard aliens hanging out
dinosaurs.
All over. They totally are.
So there was an article in the South Florida Sun Sentinel back last year called "Out of Control Iguanas Infesting South Florida."
I read that. Is that about the one that ended up in the toilet?
I haven't got that far. I was just laughing.
That was a couple Christmases ago.
It says packs of green iguanas are swarming seawalls, roaming yards and parks, and leaving a path of destruction and filth in their wake.
And turds.
They're taking over. Turds. Okay. They're pretty big.
I like that the cemetery is more like a park, and it is home to Bahamian mariners, Cuban cigar makers, Spanish-American war veterans, soldiers, civilians, millionaires, paupers, people of all races, Catholics, Protestants, and Jews rest side by side, echoing the island city's diverse heritage. And that's so true. Like people, any kind of person, you know, because if you go to a larger city, you will have the Lutheran burial ground or the Catholic burial ground or the Jewish burial ground. And in Key West, everyone's just hanging out together.
And the iguana turds are huge.
They are. Yep, they are.
Oh my God.
Yep, it's really disturbing. I wasn't lying.
They're tiny dinosaur turds.
So the reason that the cemetery was moved there in 1847, which when you think about it, that's very, very early. I wouldn't think of anything existing in Key West in 1847, but it did. There was a Category 5. Of course, they didn't name them, but the Great Havana Hurricane of 1846 struck Cuba and then curved toward Florida, maintaining its intensity when it struck Key West because the water is so warm and there's nothing, obviously, in those 90 miles to slow it down at all. To prevent future flooding, the Key West Cemetery was established in 1847. As I mentioned, it's on the highest natural elevation and is bounded by Angela, Margaret, Francis, and Olivia streets, with the entrance being on Passover Lane. They have very sweet street names in Key West as well. I'm sure those women's names reference some famous Key Westian.
Passover Lane.
Passover Lane.
Sounds kind of depressing.
Isn't Passover as a feast? I don't know my... I know my Jewish
Passover
holidays. I just don't know
kind of
the
depressing.
reason.
Oh, let's go and sling
Passover.
some lamb's blood over our door.
That's a little bit about the cemetery and who's buried there and some of the funnier one-liners. And the living residents of the cemetery are four-legged dinosaurs, miniature dinosaurs who are
apparently
friendly.
Being rounded up and sent north to be pets or food for zoos.
Well,
or where it's too cold for them to survive if they escape.
They're pretty prolific.
The state encourages private property owners to humanely kill wild iguanas on their land. This is kind of sad. I'm very upset about the iguanas now.
I don't think that's something a cat would eat. And there's a lot of feral cats. And they may eat the small ones, but the big ones get really big.
Yeah, they're as big as a cat. So
no, they can get, well, I've seen some in the US Virgin Islands too. They can get like 4 or 5 feet, but the ones in Key West are typically like 2 or 3 feet, maybe not that big. That's probably big for Key West. There's a lot of them, and they kind of, the way they move is a little disturbing.
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, they're kind of cool looking, but then when you really start staring at them, they're disturbing.
I prefer the cats and the chickens.
Yeah, I don't really like chickens, but roosters disturb me.
They have really handsome roosters, though, and they just sort of run around and crow. And you'll see them on roofs, and you'll see them in bushes, just scratching around. It's a very wild place.
Apparently,
literally, figuratively, and literally.
All right, let's.
Speaking of wild,
Yes. So Elena is buried in the Key West Cemetery, and Carl visits her every day. Often eating his lunch by her grave.
Sure.
And carrying on conversations with her.
As one does.
Yes. It was during one of these visits that he heard her respond to him. So he became certain that she was alive and that if it flooded, she would drown. So
I think what gets me the most about this story is that it takes place in the 20th. This is not that long ago.
Right.
Like,
this is the 20th century.
People could still be alive that when this story took place.
Right.
They would be old, but they could still be alive.
Yes. So Carl approached Elena's parents and begged them to allow him to build an above ground mausoleum for her. And they agreed. I mean, why wouldn't you? So Elena's body was exhumed and taken to a mortuary for safekeeping. And this is where Carl bribes the owner to allow him private access to her coffin. And he opens it and was horrified to see that she had begun to decay already. And so he fills the coffin with formaldehyde to preserve her body.
Not her. Oh, because he doesn't know how to embalm.
No.
Oh.
I would assume that they would have embalmed her.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know when that became standard practice. Yeah. Somebody tell us.
Sure, 30s. That's
late.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
She was probably embalmed.
But he basically, I mean, he felt like if he put her in a floating tank of formaldehyde, then it would preserve her better. Yeah.
Like those baby animals in science class.
Yes.
Like the fetal pigs.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly that. So once the mausoleum was finished, her body was reinterred. And of course, he kept visiting her because he had a key. Pretty much on a nightly basis, he, would go and visit her until one night he loaded her body in a toy wagon and rolled it to his lavatory located in the airplane that he was building behind the hospital. Oh, sure. Because putting a lavatory in an airplane makes total sense.
Oh, embalming is a very old practice.
Oh, yeah. It just...
What I was thinking of is cremation wasn't a very popular thing.
I have a fun story about that, about a Charleston person that I tell on my ghost tours a lot of times. So he put her in his lab.
Okay.
And began work.
So now he has a lab?
He has a lab and his airplane. And
I'm not even... There's so many holes in the story. There's like more holes than...
It's like, how could all these doctors be ignoring the fact that he's building an airplane lab in the backyard of the hospital? And there's actually pictures of this airplane lab, so we know that it existed. Yes.
Did he get a permit?
No. So he begins working.
So she's in the lab.
He's in the lab, and he begins working.
But she's still in her coffin, in the formaldehyde coffin, or is she
he taken her out of. He drained the formaldehyde out.
How long was she being pickled for?
However long it took them to build the mortuary, so a couple months.
Okay.
Yeah. So he drained the formaldehyde, and then that's what he did while she was still in the mausoleum, and then he took the body out and wheeled it out in a wagon.
I want to know what someone looks like at this point.
I don't think you do. He begins working on her to keep her body in
Hadn't
condition.
She been buried for a while before
2 years.
Yes,
it's been 2 years.
That's what I thought I remembered.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's working to keep her intact.
Fresh.
Yeah. Fresh. I like that. So he removed her eyes and replaced them with glass ones.
Okay.
I don't know. I think her eyes would probably already
She wouldn't
been
have
gone.
had any eyes after 2 years.
Right.
Eyes are water.
Yeah. So her eyes were gone, so he put glass ones in.
Okay.
Yeah. He filled her chest cavity with rags to keep it from withering away. He layered silk and wax over her skin, or what was left of it, and then wired her bones together so her arms and legs could still be moved once he replaced all of her skin.
Right.
When his administrations were complete, he moved her body home to his house. And for the next 7 years, he lived with Elena as his wife. I'll let you pause and reflect.
How does someone How does this go unnoticed, though, right? He's a fake doctor. He's building an airplane.
In the backyard of the hospital.
And so he pays the guy to let him take her.
Right.
But this guy isn't going to be like, hey, Bob, you'll never guess what happened to me the other night. Like, it's Key West. There's hardly anyone at that point. Not many people that are living there.
Right.
And in that kind of place, news travels fast.
Yeah.
I just can't believe that he
got away with it
for so long and that it did not get back to the family.
Right.
It's just shocking to me.
Of course, even though he'd done all these things
right
to the body,
sure,
it still continued to degrade.
Oh.
So he would continue.
Well, it's not even really a body anymore. So
right?
What else is happening?
Yes. He just kept applying more wax and adding disinfectants to keep the smell of decay at bay.
Oh, honey.
Yeah. He also made a wig from what was left of her beautiful dark curls. And he even gave her jewelry to wear. So Elena's sister, who survived, or at least until 1946, Florinda, periodically asked for the key to the mausoleum so she could go and visit her. And he always managed to come up with a good excuse as to why she couldn't go to the mausoleum.
Well, why wouldn't he just let her? Because you don't see a body when you go to a mausoleum. There's just a stone or a wall with engraving. You don't see a coffin.
It depends.
Okay, but still, you don't see a body is my point.
Right.
So he could have been like, okay, here, have at it.
Yeah, I mean, he could put the coffin back.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that the coffin was still there.
So I think it's weird he didn't let her.
Yeah.
So many questions.
But then again, I mean, that's kind of, you read the story on the internet through multiple sources and every single one is a little bit different.
Is there a book about him or this? Or
Yes.
Okay.
There is a book by
that's factual.
Ben Harrison is what I read. Some of it is available on Undying Love.
But still,
that's what it's
I
called.
don't know how you research it because a lot of it still has to be word of mouth. You know, because there's not evidence. There's only so much evidence you can gather. You really have to connect. There's lots of dots to connect.
Right.
And there's no clear, this is what happened.
And I mean, his name changed. And I mean, like, I was looking just through census records and stuff, and he's von Casel in some, and he's Tanzler and others.
Who knows him? And then after she died, so he's not working at the hospital anymore. I mean, what does he do?
Yeah, I read one mention that said that he lost his job because he would just want to spend all his time with her. But yeah, I mean, then it comes down to,
I want to read this book.
How did he live?
There's so many more facts. I'm so interested in this story. I really I need more.
So in 1940, people were suddenly starting to take notice.
I mean, it's about time.
Yeah. And it's mostly because they had observed the eternal bachelor Carl buying clothes and jewelry for a mystery love.
Okay.
And then a little boy apparently saw Tanzler, dancing with what looked like a life-size doll through the window. Yeah. After hearing the gossip, Elena's sister Florinda went to Carl's house to confront him.
He was like, yep.
And, isn't that my sister sleeping in your bed?
Guilty.
Because it sort of looks like her, maybe.
But he admitted when he was confronted, he
did admit it. Yeah.
Yep.
And so
she's my girlfriend. Yeah.
If you go online,
my dead girlfriend.
there's pictures of her, and I will post on our Instagram. She looks like a giant doll.
She just looks like a doll.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So Tanzler was arrested and put on trial, which became big news across the nation because this is not something that you
What
read
are you
about.
charging him for, though?
Well,
he didn't kill her. He's just creepy.
So here's the article from the Republican and Herald of Pottsville, Pennsylvania.
Great.
Aged man under arrest for mutilating vault.
Oh, mutilating vault?
Yes.
I don't know what that means.
So
the mausoleum.
A lot of times
robbery, grave robbery.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay.
I mean, technically, even here in the state of South Carolina, you can't disturb a grave. It's against the law.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why basically when you